Welcome to the Liberty Lobbyist, where we teach you political lessons from the purple state of New Hampshire. I am Melissa Losick. I am a former New Hampshire state representative and the current executive director and lobbyist for a grassroots liberty organization called Rebuild NH. We have a special New Year's Eve show for you today with Daniel Horowitz of the Conservative Review podcast and contributor over at The Blaze. And in some circles, he may be called the prophet of woe and lamentation, but he does more than that. He is very proactive and activist-based, just like this show. And we are going to talk about the state of politics and where we are headed in 2026. But before we do that, what do three billionaires, four major banks, and a legendary 72-year-old investor all have in common? They're all making the same shocking prediction. Gold is headed for $10,000 or more. Goldman Sachs says gold will surge 20%. JP Morgan says 25%. And one respected economist now believes that the US government could deliberately raise gold's official price to help pay off the national debt. And the world's wealthiest players are already making their move. Now you can see exactly what they're seeing for free. Our friends at American Alternative Assets just released a powerful new report, The Surprising Case for $10,000 gold. It breaks down the hidden signals, the central bank gold buying spree, and how smart Americans are protecting their retirement with gold right now. Go to cloutgold.com to download it free or call 855-803-GOLD. That's cloutgold.com or 855-803-GOLD. Don't wait. The window is closing fast. Welcome, Daniel Horowitz of the Conservative Review, contributor at The Blaze. Folks, if you are not listening to the Conservative Review, I don't really know what you're doing because, sometimes I listen to other political podcasts. I turn on Fox News or one of those other networks, and you hear the same regurgitated talking points hour over by hour from different people. And Daniel is giving you a different perspective that you're not going to hear anyplace else. He has on insightful and important guests and does amazing research. Thanks so much for coming on, my friend.
Hey, Happy New Year. And what a fortuitous way to start the new year with gold. I think that really is going to be one of the themes of the year. It's not just gold, silver, copper, palladium, platinum. The precious metals are screaming, blaring and glaring signs. The economy is in hell, going to hell, and we got to be prepared for that.
Indeed. Well, you kind of started off a little bit, but let's the State of the Union, according to Daniel Horowitz, 2025. If you could give us a letter grade of the state of American politics right now, what would you call it?
No, so I mean, an F doesn't even begin to capture it because an F would mean that you have a failed system, but we could rebuild and offer something totally different. The problem is that the F is under our banner. This is what we said was our historic mandate trifecta. This is we threw our biggest punch we could November 2024, and this is what we got. And again, you look at demographically, you look at culturally, you look at economically, and then all the meantime, it's not just that the policies are headed in the wrong direction and the direction of the country is bad, but that it's being done under our banner. So the Democrats are winning. So, you have an economy that is completely venture socialist, completely big tech monopolized, completely hallucinated through this asset bubble created by monetary fiscal policies that none of your listeners would agree with. But whether you like it or not, it's under our banner. So all it's going to do is the Democrats are going to win. And then our side, I don't know if you just saw over the, holiday week, the few, influencers that weren't in some sort of posh vacation because they earn so much money telling people the economy is great and then monetizing it. But in fact, it's bad. And, if you want to start with the economy, I think a good way to conceptualize that, again, with your ad there, often we'll give metrics of, oh my gosh, if you would measure our economy in this measure or currency in this value or pegged to gold or silver in 1971, because that was when we went off the gold standard. Well, so that you'll get some crazy thing. Our money's been devalued 98% since then, but it was a long time ago. Melissa, I could go back to January 2022. If you want to understand your financial predicament from January 2022 to now, you take the median income then and now, you are getting paid 43.6 ounces of gold. Right now, you're getting paid 19.3 ounces of gold in the median income. You understand what that means. With all the BS and the CPI numbers and any government report that we used to pen until 3 seconds ago, a year ago when Biden was there, but now we defend these reports as if they're a reflection of reality. The reality is the gold numbers and adjacent with other metals, they're telling you everything. You've lost half your value in a matter of a few years. And that's for people that are a little bit older, people like me, getting to middle age, a little bit of gray hair. So you're somewhat stable to the extent anyone could be.
Sure.
And you're losing your value. Now, how about if you're 22, 25, you haven't started a family, you haven't bought a home, and for many of them, you haven't landed your first job out of college, or if you do, you have no future. That is ultimately the question we need to be asking ourselves. We need to be asking ourselves, if I want to sort of finish the State of the Union and then you'll let me know what direction you want to head, it's really this. So if you speak to, like you said, any other host, or you turn on Fox News, basically the point of contention of this year, the most important question is, will Republicans maintain control of the House? And we can't let the Democrats win, and Republicans need to win. But in fact, that question is already answered, and there are other questions that are more important. It's a given, barring some cathartic change, that politically and economically, Democrats are going to win the House. I mean, they have first and goal with unlimited amount of tries. Maybe you could say the question is, will they flip the Senate too? But that doesn't matter. The question is, what are you going to do with the federal trifecta you currently have? And with the, states like yours in New Hampshire, but elsewhere where Republicans have trifectas, often in 20 or so states, super majority trifectas, what are you going to do now to achieve 3 goals? Okay. One is to make life better for the people as much as we can, to actually fix the economy, to cement some of these government reform changes that he promised. Healthcare we could talk about. Obviously, economy, both on the job side and the affordability side. Right? What can you do to do justice right now? Okay? And the better you do, the more likely you'll perform better in the election. But Democrats, that's a foregone conclusion. Okay? Historical average is the party out of power since Hoover wins about 25, 27 seats per cycle when the other party is in the White House. So they only need 5. They're obviously going to get that, and that's not the issue. And anyway, Republicans have done nothing with the House anyway. So that's not the most important thing. So it's number 1, what could you do, state and federal, to make life better? Number 2, what could you do that will induce the most transformational, enduring change that, yes, you can't guarantee Democrats won't countermand it, but they will come back. And how do you make it harder? Because it's the most systemic change that you acculturate the economy to it, society to it, demographically to it. That'll be sort of hard for them to undo. And we could talk about what some of that looks like. And then number 3, how do you build red state fortresses, again, both policy-wise, but also electorally, so that when the blue wave comes, it will not crack the red firewall. That to me is the bigger political question of the year, not whether Democrats will win a House that they essentially already won and have controlled. Um, but whether, you know, states like Ohio and Iowa and even Florida fall, whether Democrats flip all three branches in a state like Georgia, but even redder than that, Georgia seems to go back and forth presidential wise, but you know, they've been winning these special elections 50, overperforming 15, 20 points or so, to the point where, you know, areas that Trump has won by 10 to 15 points, they're considered unsafe and Republicans have to scramble. And, you know, one congresswoman in New York in a Trump plus 15 seat had to pull her nomination for UN ambassador, something we've never seen before because they were too scared to conduct that special election. That to me is the bigger political question. That's my number 3, but that ties into my first 2 of doing justice and righteousness for the public, economically, sovereignty, security wise, and also doing so in an enduring way that will, you know, independent voters are lost, in my view. Let's be honest. There's just no way with this sort of economy, Trump going on to 10, 11 years of him being on the scene, the fatigue from that, that's a foregone conclusion. The more salient question is, could we at least encourage conservative voters to turn out in mass? And that is not enough to win a national election at the 50-yard line. But, you know, that we don't have places like Texas, Florida fall, or significant swaths of it fall locally, state legislatively, maybe in some of these places, governor-wise. Democrats are threatening to win in really make a run for it in Ohio and Iowa. So that is sort of my 1,000-foot view, policy and electorally, what we need to focus on.
You know, after the 24 election, I kept telling everybody, we have 2 years. We have 2 years. We have 2 years. And it's wild to me how people who have been doing politics for decades even couldn't seem to wrap their heads around what I was saying, that we had 2 years. And even until the elections this year, I was still hearing out of people, well, you know, after the next election, we'll be able to do da da da. And I'm like, no, we have a year now. Now we have 1 year. We've squandered 1 year. Now we have 1 more left. And that's it. But I think what's really interesting about what you said, we've lost the independents. Yeah, I agree with that. I don't think we're getting them back. But what I have even been shocked about, I mean, I knew that things were going to be bad. You and I talked about this so much before the 24 election, that whoever won was going to be left holding the bag. Yeah. And truly both parties are responsible. But
economically, we've reached the point of no return.
Absolutely. And whoever won was going to be left holding the bag, and they would be holding the responsibility for when the economy fell out. But what I'm seeing now is a level of demoralization on the right that I haven't seen in a really, really long time. Even people who are really passionate and involved in politics we're not even apathetic anymore. They are truly demoralized. Yeah. And I'm not sure what everyone expected when we took a year down in DC and accomplished absolutely nothing. I mean, again, it would have been, I'm not saying all economies have a natural up and a downswing. It was time for a downswing. I understand it's probably necessary for there to be a downswing, and I understand the political fallout of that regardless of the reason. But there were still things that could have been done to at least invigorate the base, make people feel like it mattered that we won. Yeah. And we have not done that. And I don't see that happening over the next year at the federal level. But at the state level, let's talk about maybe there. So you started off by saying number 1 is, you know, quality of life issues. And this is a tricky thing at the state level, because at the end of the day, a lot of the issues are bigger than a state. But what kind of quality of life issues do you think, where do you think states could go with that?
This is a very tough question because the two sort of tie together, the federal and the state, in the sense that we have accepted a certain economic structure, the Federal Reserve, the way, like, let me just divert here. People don't even realize trillions of dollars of governmental pensions are run through the Mag 7 big tech companies. So that in itself gives them a degree of unnatural anti-market leverage share that like, they can do whatever they want, and we're kind of screwed. We have this K-shaped economy that not that we believe in what Bernie Sanders believes in, that it's our job to redistribute wealth. It's that just the opposite. It's that government, through fiscal and monetary policy, they've redistributed wealth. So we have an economy where we have this vicious cycle of stagflation and an affordability crisis that benefits only asset bubbles, juices up the stock market, housing prices. But so 10 to 20% are doing very well from that, but everyone else is on the losing side of that. And until and unless we have a solution for that, the Democrats are going to keep winning, and they're going to keep winning because even if Democrats slaughter it in saying 2026, we're ready here, but November. So you understand, we're not going to sort of vomit out the illness and recover, because now it's even worse. Then they could block and tackle. They have more power. But at the end of the day, in the minds of the American people, who is in charge? The people in the state trifectas, the people in Congress, or the president? We always, rightly or wrongly, view the president as, the steward of the country, as the man on that, who has his hand on the steering wheel.
Yeah.
And you understand, we're going to still have 2 more years of an increasingly, dare I say, senile guy sounding like Marie Antoinette, talking about the gold in his
Ballroom.
in his ballroom, and the great deals he cuts with Qatar and Gaza reinvestment, and then all the data centers, as he calls the AI buildings, and all the things that we promised we wouldn't be. And then once in a while, it's not that, in certain areas of health, certain areas of energy, there aren't executive orders here and there that at a given time are obviously better than Biden, but none of that is enduring. And in fact, on the things that are enduring, he's lending his support to things that conservatives traditionally did not support, but now they're going to stand down. He's endorsed all these rhinos and primaries, which is really a big part of this, because I know I hijacked your question, but in order to do transformational things, you have to have people that really have guts to cut through federal taboos. And one of them is judicial supremacism. It's another big issue. And I'm sorry, but you ain't doing that with the cadre of Republicans that Trump elects in red states. So it's like, okay, you sucked up your first year with stupidity and sophistry. Okay, that's great. Now we have all the political liabilities of your tenure without the policy benefits. Great. So now the Democrats win, 15 points past the scrimmage line. All right, but at least there's like 30 to 40% of the country that's just impervious to a Democrat takeover. Fine. So then we're going to run up the score. And that should be one of our action items that, as I've said, for the next 6 to 8 months, red state primaries should be exponentially more important than general elections, because frankly, most of those general elections, you're not going to win anyway. You're not going to win the Georgia Senate. You're just not.
Yeah.
In this environment. So it becomes much more important to elect people with a vision of what to do with, creating gold accounts, what to do with healthcare, what to do with pushing back against the federal judiciary, which is you're going to have to do. Obviously, immigration enforcement, depending on the state, crime control is a big issue. You're going to have to deal with everything that the feds aren't dealing with. You're going to have to deal with investigatory powers of the state AG to deal with both Islamic and communist terrorism. I mean, this was a big theme of 2015, the year of the terror attacks, the assassination. You had a number of deadly Islamic terror attacks, from the Israeli embassy to Boulder, Colorado. And then, of course, we had that Afghan guy killed National Guardsmen. And then you had, everything from the assassination of Charlie Kirk on down. You have all of these Antifa style groups, these Muslim Brotherhood style groups. Nobody on any side of this has any faith that the FBI has been changed one iota. And by the way, this was a big thing when you do a retrospective of the year.
Yes.
That I'm going to be your revenge. That was the rallying cry for Trump's re-election campaign that began quite early, November 2022. And it was quite a long season there. And ironically, like, it's not even that. It's just maybe petty revenge and very localized revenge, but not on the big things that we thought we were going to get.
No.
And we're just left holding the bag, and then these temporary things that are relatively better than what the Democrats would be doing, the minute they take over, which they will, it's all going to change. So again, the difference between me and everyone else on the right is this. Everyone else on the right is going to be, it's the most important thing to keep Congress, vote Republican in general election, right? So there's a 2-year cycle. The first year is explaining to us why everything they promised in the previous year of the previous 2-year cycle, they can't do, they don't have enough power to do. And the second year is why you have to keep them in power but the Democrats. But the reality is, here's the good news. The Democrats are so ahead, they're going to win anyway. So like I said, it's a matter of cutting your losses in red states. That's number one. And then the next thing is JD Vance. Not even, we're beyond, we have to look at president, which in itself is sophistry, to worry about the presidency of 2028 when we have to save the country now. But they already have their person picked out. We abolished primaries the last, we said we anointed Trump, and then we anointed him again. And then he in turn anoints people like Vivek Ramaswamy that's now losing Ohio. I would think we would sort of learn our lesson. Maybe we need to have competitive primaries, choice and competition, betters an outcome. But we're for abolishing primaries 3 years ahead. We are absolutely certain that a man who, by the way, was in the Senate for 3 seconds and nothing before that, so never had to prove himself, because the Senate doesn't even, voting isn't much, but they don't even do that anymore. Now that's not his fault, but I'm just saying he never had to be a governor that just showed men that you're able to punch through the special interests. Just the opposite. He's in with big tech every bit as much as Trump, and Qatar Akbar every bit as much as Trump. But the point is, he became vice president of no talent of his own. He was picked. So like, whoa, okay, you don't have a track record where you bled for the cause other than these viral clips of speeches. I thought we learned from that lesson, but evidently not.
We haven't learned at all.
You and I were the only ones that got Vivek, and now suddenly everyone's a big hero. Yeah, when it's too late, when something that rhymes with Tucker already elevated him, Vivek, and now suddenly everyone hates him. Yeah, well, it didn't have to be that way. Some of us kind of saw that it was just an empty suit with, viral clips, reading Twitter and just trying to copy that, not a statesman. And now he's struggling to even win. Well, that's what happens when you abolish the primaries. Trump abolished the Ohio primary, maybe not legally, but practically, by endorsing him. So similarly, perhaps we shouldn't abolish a 28 primary, a few years early, or even worry about that office. To me, the most important thing on the other side of the ledger is not that. It's red state primaries, and it's what you can do with the power right now. And again, we can go through these different action items, but the bottom line is that if you continue with the current cadre of Republican governors and gubernatorial prospects in open seats, we're not going to get anywhere.
No. And it is wild to me how primary voters are still so hung up on all that matters is MAGA. How MAGA are you is all that matters. We have one real primary here in New Hampshire going on right now, and it's for U.S. Senate, and there's two people, and that's all they talk about is who's pro-Trump and who's anti-Trump. I haven't heard a single person talk about anything that actually matters. And it's just, we're still in that lane. I think it's honestly just going to take us really losing really badly to ever move past that. Now, I think that's going to happen this year. But
Yep.
okay, let's move on to action items. I really, actually, I wanted to have you on a while ago to talk about healthcare in particular, because that's what no matter what anybody says, that was what the shutdown was about. Democrats rightfully saw an opening and they took it. Okay, when it came to the cost of healthcare and subsidies. Now, did they create the problem? Yes, of course they did. But Republicans instead tried to kind of lie and say that it was about illegal immigrants, and it was never about that. So it was truly about the cost of health insurance. That is, I think, going to be a huge issue moving forward. I told you at the time that if I was in charge and I could wave my magic wand, I would have horse traded and just let them have an extension on their subsidies in exchange for real catastrophic insurance, deregulating insurance so that we could have actual catastrophic insurance and start moving back to the way that healthcare should be, which is that insurance is for the unforeseen circumstances and not for day-to-day costs. So, and actually make HSAs great again. Right now, they're really kind of worthless, but we can make them great again. So, tell us if you could wave your magic wand when it comes to the healthcare system, because right now, I just told people this yesterday. I believe that in 5 years, Republicans will be on board with universal healthcare, because what is happening right now is completely unsustainable. They proved the last year that they are not willing to reverse course. And so I think in 5 years, we're going to be at full universal health care and Republicans will be on board with it. Okay, I'll let you have the floor. You tell me what you think.
Look, healthcare is the 800-pound gorilla in the room, because that is the biggest part of the economy. That is where we have all these fake jobs, by the way, created there. But healthcare is the biggest share of our debt, which therefore is the biggest share of our debt servicing, which therefore is the biggest driver of inflation. Meaning it's not just that you understand, it's like almost like a double entendre. It's not just that healthcare is often the biggest household cost. By the way, it's about $35,000. You are spending about $35,000. So some people are getting it paid for with inflationary tax, payer dollars. But if you're not, then what's happening is between the premium, deductible, and out of pocket, you're spending about $35,000 a year, whether you're sick or healthy. Now, you're either directly spending that or it's your employer, but it's not your employer. People need to understand, and it's not just the share that you contribute to the employer plan, which has gone up exponentially, both sides of the ledger, but you'd be getting that in salary. It's not free money. So, if healthcare would be functional, you would get, he'd be able to pay you another $25,000, your employer. So here's the good news. The good news is Republicans are backed into a corner. So, typically Republicans would say, look, let's focus on maybe cultural issues or this or that, or immigration, transgenderism. We don't want to touch people's bennies. Here's the good news. They have nowhere to run. Democrats set a trap. So it's go big or go home on healthcare. What do I mean by that? Of course, we know Obamacare took the existing problems with healthcare, that it was a government-funneled monopoly tethering health care to health insurance, and then tethering health insurance to your place of employment with the tax system. That was the original problem. Then they just created Obamacare that just made even that actuarially insolvent, unless you're getting it subsidized or your employer is paying another $10,000 to $20,000 more than pre-Obamacare, which is coming out of your salary. That's summing up what Obamacare did on the insurance side. And then certainly we have on the quality side, they destroyed private business because of the paperwork and everything, and created the mergers and acquisitions consolidations, where you have a few insurance companies and a few hospital systems, and then even some of them are horizontally integrated now. So that's the problem. We have a monopoly.
Can I interrupt you for a second? Because I so admire the Democrats politically. Like, they did
Long game.
That was the long game, man. They were willing to sacrifice an election for it. They sacrificed 2010 for it, no problem. Okay. But they turned out so far ahead of the game in the long run. See, we sacrificed elections for nothing. We are going to lose huge in 26, but we got nothing for it. If you're going to burn political capital, you should at least have something that you accomplish. So the fact that that's what I'm saying. They always wanted full universal health care. Of course they did, right? They're going to get it, okay? Because at this point, we would spend less money with ration universal health care,
Yeah.
a situation like that. But it took a little while, but it's going to happen because they just finessed it beautifully. I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, that's a brilliant point, Melissa. That's a really good point. They lost over 60 seats and really a generation of state power on that issue, but it worked and it cemented where what they wanted is that no middle income, middle upper income even family can afford healthcare with dignity.
Yeah.
And that's before we get into the quality. I would argue COVID in many respects was a bastard child of Obamacare by boxing out these independent minded doctors. So it's degraded the care of health. It's synergized everything that the medical freedom movement hates about our sick care system. That, I mean, this is the system where we spend, it's now approaching actually 5 trillion annually on healthcare. More than half of that, if you look carefully, is actually government, and then even a greater share is influenced by government with employer tax exclusion, things like that. You know, that's the sucking sound, and we're getting it for an increasingly diminishing life expectancy.
Yeah.
So I think now Republicans, so that was true since Republicans refused to repeal Obamacare, right? That was always true. It's been true for a while. But what has changed is these extra Biden era subsidies that basically got to the point where no one could afford a private plan without help. And they did 100% help for most people, 90% for other people. So here's the good news. That expired. Now you can't extend that. Just extend it. So Republicans so far agreed not to. But the point is, they're in charge now. No, I mean, think about a Gen Z person. They don't even remember pre-Obamacare. They don't even remember what caused this.
Yeah.
It's funny because, we're pretty young. You're even younger. And it was like, yeah, isn't that obvious? Obamacare did this, but it's actually not obvious, unfortunately.
I used to pay $50 a month for myself to have catastrophic insurance. That's how much I paid.
Bingo. The rest you
and I
pay
would
as you
pay
go.
out of pocket. I used to go to a dermatologist a lot when I was young. Okay. I would pay $30 out of pocket with no insurance for a visit to the dermatologist. That was pre-Obamacare.
No, and that's the thing. So the good news is Republicans are basically there's nothing they can do about this. There's they can't run away from it and say, well, I'd rather not touch the Holy Grail, or I'd rather not touch an entitlement. Well, you're forced to. You got to do something if you don't want to extend it, which we obviously shouldn't. So whatever you do is going to be Trump care. You know what I mean? It's going to be the equivalent for the Republicans of what Obamacare was. So you may as well give it your best shot and go for the glory and fully repeal Obamacare, fully repeal so much of what came before it, and actually make healthcare like car insurance, medical insurance like car insurance, decentralize it, and then the few people that need help, you restructure Medicaid as just direct payments to now you could purchase any plan you want. You could offer any plan you want. That needs to be done. And look, there's various ways you can do this. There's various levels that I think you can do. But at a minimum, you got to repeal, first of all, the Obamacare provision of banning physicians from owning hospitals. That really, was a handout to the corporate cartel. And then you got to repeal the scope of coverage mandates. You got to allow cheap catastrophic coverage, exactly what you just referenced. Because it's like you have a lot of great doctors that you and I associated with during COVID that have their own concierge style direct primary care practices. And that's great. But I got tens of thousands of dollars coming out of me from my employer that I lose in salary for this stupid grift. So yeah, you better believe I want to benefit from it. I don't have money left to then pay out of pocket. But
No,
if
we have
you're,
this
if
crazy perverse incentives
yeah,
to spend the most amount of money on healthcare. And I always knew that we spent more on healthcare than any other country on earth. What I recently learned is that we also subsidize healthcare more than any other country on earth, which when you put those two things together,
yep.
I mean, that is mind-boggling. But
The
yes,
more you
we have to,
subsidize something, the more you get of it. And
yeah,
this is the lesson that Trump had the full bully pulpit to express following the election when everyone knew the word Bidenflation. Now they forgot it. Now it's all blamed on him, but he had one shot at it. Like, look, folks, I know you're getting these programs, but you understand that the programs are why you have the individual asset bubbles in the sectors themselves, like healthcare. But then the macro healthcare is driving the cost of everything else because that's the biggest driver of the inflationary debt. So you can't lower pricing without getting rid of the subsidies and the money printing. And that's what it needs to be. It's only unaffordable because we have it. If the money ain't there and the people don't have it, the insurance companies can't charge. This is the whole thing with the Biden era subsidies, that it's a degenerative cycle. So government's like, okay, we'll give 50,000 per enrollee. So then they'll raise the price to 60,000, and then so on and so forth. And this is what they did in education as well. So the fix is simple: stop inflating prices with subsidies. Break the insurance cartel, cut out the middleman, okay, and treat it like everything else, and then have one safety net like you have with food stamps, which, say what you want about it, but it's not nearly as market distorting as Medicaid is. So the idea is, number one is it's not just, everyone agrees that they can't just not do the subsidy, like the Biden era subsidies, because you're just ending that much of it, but you still have the Obamacare unaffordable structure. So
right.
you're going to get blamed for it, right? That's a fact. You have no choice, nowhere to run, nowhere to hide. So it's not like, well, should we deal with this issue? Should we not? You got to deal with it. So you know what? What you got to do is, at the end of the day, make a new rule, allow insurers, employers, trade associations, and states to offer unregulated alternatives, anything, any structure whatsoever.
Mhm.
Then, now that you have cheaper options for everyone to use, then you could talk about expanding HSAs, because right now under the current system, I don't have money for that. Then you raise the contribution cap from 12,000. Right now it's like half that, but you double it to like 12,000 for an individual, 24,000 for families, and then also allow the tax-free usage. Right now it's only for out of pocket. Go for everything.
Yes.
You got to even up the treatment between the insurance cartel and alternatives, and then also within insurance, even up the treatment between employer and individual. So that allows tax-free use for premiums, concierge fees, health sharing ministries, and then employers. So it's not just individuals should get the same tax cut, tax exclusion that employers get, but then employers also, their tax treatment shouldn't only be, oh, if you compensate your employee with the private cartel product, then you get it, but without that, no, they should be able to say, you know what? As part of your compensation benefit that we don't have to pay taxes on, unlike your salary, it's not just we're going to offer you United Health or Cigna's, group plan, whatever. You could also get that tax-free use for these other alternatives if you want to do out-of-pocket HSA, premiums in your HSA, health sharing ministries, your concierge fees for your favorite TPC doctor. You see what I mean?
Yeah.
That's going to decentralize. That's going to equal the treatment. That's going to break the monopoly. And that's also going to do something that everyone claimed to agree with. Even Nancy Pelosi said this during Obamacare, that a person who's talented shouldn't be forced into a job because of it. A lot of people are too scared to take that leap of faith and start their small business because they have no way of getting medical insurance in a viable way.
Yeah.
Both this tax treatment and the deregulation and repeal of Obamacare will allow for that to happen. So the Republicans can't get crushed on taking away people's bennies more than they are anyway now, doing nothing. So you may as well actually solve the problem. Obviously, we need to just a couple more things here. We need to demand price transparency by prohibiting contracts that block providers from offering discounts to self-pay patients. So this is a big problem that, if you're a doctor who takes Cigna or Aetna or whatever, they'll often lock you in that you can't offer self-paid discounts. So again, we need to encourage that as much as we can. We need to repeal the HMO Act and subject managed care giants to antitrust laws. All that stuff needs, as much as we can, should be repealed. Anything that created monopolies, anything that boxes out choice and competition, anything that discourages transactions from individuals to doctors and involves third parties, no special treatment. This is true free market healthcare. Obviously, the ban on physician-owned hospitals needs to be repealed big time. And look, there's a lot of other things depending on how deep we want to go, and they do have to get the votes. But see, this is the type of thing, Melissa, that requires Trump to do campaign style events with serious people and doctors and consumers, not just like he'll sometimes put out a Truth Social post that says some elements that we agree with, like, look at what Obamacare did, and this stuff is stupid, and the insurance companies ripping people off. But it can't just be a one-off. You got to have a campaign style into driving a piece of legislation that becomes clear that every Republican must support. I mean, Trump's king of the party. He uses that when he wants.
Thank you.
We know Freedom Caucus guys get forced to vote for stupid liberal stuff. So it should be used for healthcare reform.
Daniel, I think it's quite clear that there is no plan legislatively at all. I don't believe that Trump got into office with a single legislative plan other than expanding the tax cuts, or extending it rather. And I think that was his only legislative plan for his 4 years. And yes, and I am so sick to death of hearing that nothing good is happening because Congress sucks. Yes, Congress sucks, but Congress sucks because Trump. He is the one who put them into power. He is the king of the party. They would bend over backwards. They would do backflips for him. There's like 2 Republicans who won't do backflips for him. Okay. If he called it in and said, this is what I want to happen this year, by gosh darn it, that is exactly what would happen. At least the fight would happen. Now, of course, we do have the issues in the Senate, but which is why I said they should have gotten some of this in exchange for extending the subsidies for a little while, but whatever. But there's no plan. I want to transition to a different topic that's a little bit more state focused, but also kind of goes along with this. You've been very, very outspoken about the AI issue, but in a way that nobody else is being outspoken about the AI issue. Everybody else, when they got panic alarmist about the AI issue, it's because, oh no, it's going to take over jobs and da 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 da. But I think you and I both agree that creative destruction can be part of free market capitalism, right? And it's a necessary part of free market capitalism at different points in time. And you're not looking at this as we should somehow inhibit or stop progress. Progress happens. Here's the issue. I don't remember, anybody, the government having to somehow get involved for, this laptop that I'm using right now to be developed. That never happened. We had plenty of progress technologically without needing to have meetings with CEOs in the Oval Office. And on top of that, I think what a lot of people are not understanding is happening, especially if you're not living in one of these localities, you're not really seeing it, is how much state and local governments are bending over backwards to create unnatural anti-free market circumstances to artificially prop up AI development in such a way that, frankly, will actually discourage any innovation moving forward. I think especially with all of its resource uses, right? These data centers use a tremendous amount of resources. And if they are required to use that many resources and people don't want them near them because they don't want them driving up their costs of all those resources, eventually they will be required to innovate, to use less resources. And that is one of my concerns by them saying, oh, not only is it fine for you to be here and drive up everyone's electricity costs, drive up everybody's water costs, we are actually going to make you tax exempt for the next 30 years.
Yep.
Talk a little bit about these, because I think most people are not understanding if they don't live near where this is happening. Like we don't have that in New Hampshire. We don't have the land for that. But if you're in a place that's tighter like us, not an issue. But some of these states have a lot of land. That's what's happening. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, what if I wanted to open a Section 8 housing project next door to you? So if you oppose that, is that impeding progress? Well, when it comes, so two things people need to be aware of. So number one, and this ties into our previous discussion, why we didn't focus on all these things we wanted to do, and an immigration moratorium, and reforming welfare, and getting government out of housing, and judicial reform, which is needed for Trump's own executive initiatives being mowed down, gold accounts, healthcare reform. I'm just kind of going through stuff we're not going to have time to talk about. Giving more of a moratorium on small business taxes in a way that would have rebalanced the economy, reprivatized it as Scott Bessent promised, but then did the opposite. They started it with Stargate. And I was thinking, okay, wait, we have $500 billion for big tech. I was like, I thought we were in debt. And everyone's like, no, it's not government money. I was like, okay, but then why is Trump announcing it? Then what is he doing to facilitate it? And the answer is it's a whole of government approach to take the wealthiest companies that only have their market share because of a juiced up valuation in the stock market exclusively from government fiscal and monetary policies and government pensions. So now everything you do to juice up the stock market, it redundantly juices them up because they're like 40% of the entire stock market. None of this is free market. So now they have leverage over us that they wouldn't naturally have. So the last thing that you and I have in our arsenal, the last thing that you and I have that the bad guys don't, the globalists, the big tech bros, all these dystopian, transhumanist, techno-feudalists, smart city surveillance state people, and this all ties in to this issue. It's multi-layered: quality of life, it's market distortions, it's energy, it's water, it's power, it's real innovations and investments in the tech sector, which would naturally be going if government wouldn't be artificially steering it. They call it a Manhattan Project. Now, say what you want about a Manhattan Project. Sometimes it's necessary, but that's not free market. So right off the bat, if you have libertarian listeners listening, well, you can't have it both ways in once. At one time. It's either free market or it's a Manhattan Project. Manhattan Project is like military. Military is not free market. It might be a necessity, but it's not. Government is unnaturally steering investments through a regulatory scheme, land use scheme, tax abatements at a local level that we've never seen before. And then there's something else too. Let's say, Melissa, I have a product I create, and I could show pretty strong evidence that it will increase your heart function in a way that might add 10 years to your life. But in order to do that and embark on it for whatever reason, I would have to amputate some of your limbs right now. And then you never know. Maybe because of that improved health, you might grow back the limb. Could be. Well, obviously, that's not a promising technology, albeit with some problems that need to be fixed. That's not a viable technology. And a free market vets that out. A government-driven market doesn't. So the data centers is the new electric vehicles. It's the new wind and solar in that respect. And it's often, honestly, the new vaccines too. So they want complete AI amnesty. They want complete absolving of liability, absolving of all regulatory scheme. Now, we don't like onerous regulations, but getting back to how I started this discussion, let's say I said I'm anti-regulation. So, Melissa, I denude you of your ability to petition in your local community to not have Section 8 housing next to you. Well, no, that's not liberty. That's tyranny, right? So getting back to this is a multi-layered issue. There's the financial side, the technology side, but I want to deal with the land use, power, quality of life side. They are pursuing the worst, least promising, most side effect riddled aspect of AI called generative AI or um, artificial general intelligence, AGI, which is this oracle godlike thing rather than narrow, low latency, um, quantum computing, robotics, things like that. Um, what they're doing is the costliest thing that produces the least, has the most mistakes, and really is only good for the surveillance state. That's the only reason you would have this cloud-based system, and that's what you need data centers for. At least the hyperscale. Now, you have data centers of all sorts, but the hyperscale AI data centers. Now, so like this, everything's a give and take in life. We are not for regulating energy production out of oblivion like the left has been doing for years. But as conservatives, most of us, our hearts are in rural America. I love rural America. That's what I identify as, a rural American. And we certainly don't want to contaminate our landscapes just because the left hijacked real environmentalism and what it actually is. And that's why now what you don't want is federal standards in either direction. What you want is the ability at the local level. It's a balancing of equity. So, for example, we all agree we need power plants, but there are appropriate and inappropriate places to make them. And now everyone's going to eventually say, not in my backyard. And you have to balance the equities. And this is the only way you can really do it is at a local level. And that's for something that we all agree has use, is indispensable, we absolutely need. Okay. The Trump administration comes in and they want to ban your ability from ever blocking an AI data center. But it's a misnomer. We're not the ones blocking it. They're the ones putting it in unnaturally rezoning ag land, which, by the way, we need a lot more agriculture in America now with food and meat prices than we need chat GPT slop. In fact, I'd do without it, so this is not robotics. This is not narrow AI. This is AGI, kind of the chatbot nonsense, the surveillance state. Not saying there's no good that could come out of it, but the point is the 800-pound gorilla in the room is it comes at a huge cost. So I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I've calculated the amount of data centers we already have takes up more landmass than the entirety of our energy infrastructure, which powers America, except this sucks it out. So that's the thing. You destroy neighborhoods, you take away the quality of life, water, power. Okay, Melissa, here's the thing. We might be able to spin this up, mix it up, put everyone's life on the cloud, and it will pop out this like oracle god. Maybe it will do that. That's their promise. But up front, here's what you're going to have to offer us. And it's like, well, wait a minute. I think we need to discuss this. Oh, in comes the Trump administration. Actually, you're not going to be able to discuss that because we're going to say that everyone has to put this anywhere it's built. We don't offer that for gas-powered, coal-powered, gas-powered power plants that are needed. And this is sucking it out. So this is the thing. We have the right to say we don't want this. And again, I'm going to go back to my analogy. If you have a technology that's theoretical, but it requires so much draconian pain, you got to get better. And you know what? If it's viable, it will.
It will.
Like computers used to be buildings and then they fit into nothing. So supercomputing will go the same way if this is viable. And then what you're going to have is, if it is successful, you're going to have all this infrastructure that's wasted. By the way, it depreciates within 3 to 5 years. That's another reason why it's insolvent. And that's why they need the tax favors, because it's insolvent from an investment standpoint without government favors. And what we've learned from green energy is that anything that needs government favors to do it and a government favors anything that you're doing different that you would do with any other industry, we ought not do it.
Yes. No, my concern, I have lots of concerns, but government intervention and cronyism impedes progress. It does not create progress. It impedes
Yep.
progress. Well, okay. I just want to make the point that during COVID, all of these same tech bros we all railed against as transhumanist globalists, and then
Yep.
notice the exact same people rebranded. And now they are proudly the tech bros. And that's now a good thing. And now we're totally fine with it. The same people are either silent or celebrating it. It's very
Yep.
interesting. Okay, I hear two arguments about this. Number one, but China's going to beat us, and that's really bad. As if we suddenly care about China. We don't seem to care about them in any other way. But there's that. And isn't it true that China has kind of abandoned the idea of AGI or really pursuing AGI?
So here's the thing. We already have 15 times more hyperscale data centers than China does. And we have, if we would allow government to keep subsidizing and allow them again to unnaturally
Yes.
rezone, because that's what it is. We're not the ones unnaturally blocking, right? If I open up a car garage repair shop next door to you, my son likes fixing cars, and he would love to do that, but you can't do that on a residential street. That's not Liberty. And you can't have a federal standard, but that's why we have local zoning is indispensable. Sometimes it could get too much, and that is a balance, but you need to leave it in the arm's length of the local citizenry to ebb and flow those zoning laws. Otherwise, you get tyranny, and you get, red state landmass is the last thing we have that the globalists don't have. And that's what they want. They did it for green energy, and now they want it for the data centers. So we already had, so if we allowed them to build everything they wanted to, like I counted, there's 40 hyperscale plans just in the state of Indiana. It just doesn't make sense. So China's not competing in that. I'll tell you what China is doing. Google how China's seaports work. Okay. This stuff is, you could program on a laptop. They're having freight trains, synergizing the timing of them, efficiencies. This is narrow AI. This is not like Chat GPT slop, just nonsense that does nothing for you and has so many societal ills and cultural negatives and gets things wrong. That's what they're doing. To the extent that China has used cloud-based technology, they've already done that for the surveillance state, and we ought not copy them. Another point is,
and we're barreling towards that as well.
Yeah. And another point is that, a couple more points actually on the China thing. So I would take this administration a little bit more seriously that it's trying to combat China if it didn't personally thwart a law duly passed by Congress to allow China to maintain ownership of TikTok, to say that I want 600,000 foreign students from China when every day on the DOJ website you see indictments for trade theft and espionage and counterintelligence, things like that. So I would take that a little bit more serious. I mean, the business dealings of this administration with China are pretty deep. So it's like, I'm sorry, buddy. Like, I don't really take that seriously. So that's what the China thing, to bring this full circle, Roomba is a company, an American company that was doing robotics, but I think a great example of how we've misallocated resources to AGI, and it went out of business, and China bought it up. So, that's what they're doing. The way to combat China is not to become like them in terms of the surveillance state. And by the way, there's one thing if we had these like mom and pop, like, yeah, America tech companies, but sorry, but Google the AP article on the American companies that built China's surveillance state. It just and persecution as well. It just came out a couple months ago. that article, they're in with China. There have been so many breaches. It's the biggest joke that we're going to beat China with the companies that are working with them. They would
Yeah.
have to be independent companies. If that This has nothing to do with that. It's a complete grift involved with the donors. If the donors wouldn't have come to Trump from those companies, this would not be the most important thing. Suddenly it is. The same reason he flipped on H-1B, the same reason he flipped on the Chinese visas. This is not hard. It
Yeah.
all ties together the same way he got closer to Qatar than he was in his first term. You follow the money. I mean, like, I'm sorry, people try to project on this man these ideological thoughts in any direction. It's not that he doesn't have thoughts or ideas or beliefs at any given time, but the number one thing is always going to be transactional. So everyone takes it serious. Oh, China, China. Yeah, but then he wouldn't be doing all these other things. So it's not about China. It's all about it's about where his empire is that he's building. He's not running again, but he's building politics as this fiefdom for his family. And, Don Jr. and Eric are thick as thieves involved in this, and they plan on being involved for the rest of their lives. And this is what it's all about. So I'm
It's
sorry. I
not
don't need
hard.
someone's
Every time
vanity
I hear
project to destroy our brains, our liberty, our quality of life, our power, and misallocation of investments.
somebody confused by the actions of the Trump administration, usually it's just sort of your normie Republicans. And I'm like, none of this is confusing. It is the same thing that you always thought about politics before, which is that politicians are bought and paid for.
Yep.
That explains it all. He is bought and paid for, but maybe on a more extreme level than we've even seen before. I always said, that Trump is this vessel where people project all of their hopes and fears onto, and none of which are real.
No.
He's just your sort of normie, run-of-the-mill, mainstream establishment Republican that we've always had before, but with a worse mouth on the line. That's
And the
pretty much it.
ability to capture the hard right
Yeah.
and get them to stand down and go along with things they never would go along with, bad primary candidates. And, Mitt Romney and Paul Ryan were never able to endorse a rhino, and have that rhino win against our better candidates. So, I mean, this is a big problem. These are all things we need to think about. Obviously, the AI stuff is going to loom very, very large.
In 26.
It's completely insolvent. That's why OpenAI already wrote a letter to the White House asking for a backstop for loan guarantees, because it's not, I mean, you would think having all government pensions, see, this is what government does. It sends the pensions through NVIDIA, Meta, Alphabet, Google, okay, these companies. Then everything they do fiscally and monetarily is designed to juice up the stock market. So it's self-fulfilling. And yet still that's not enough cash, because frankly, it's not. They need about $6 trillion for their CapEx build out for the data centers. To just give your audience a sense of how insolvent this is, OpenAI has made $1.5 trillion in obligations. Now, a lot of that kind of is fake, to be fair. It's a circle jerk, circuitous thing where basically NVIDIA will pay them to buy from them. So you're not creating new capital, but they only earn between 10-15 billion in revenue, and yet 1.5 trillion in obligations. So this thing is a very big problem. Oracle is the first one that's insolvent, and it's a whole big chain there. The big concern is that they're going to make themselves too big to fail.
And that is the concern. And right now, I think a lot of people are not understanding or realizing that the only thing that is even propping up what is left looking good, quote unquote, about the economy is AI. Everything is sort of being built on top of this bubble that's just floating everything up.
Yep.
And if it pops, or even if it just the steam gets let out of it, everything else is going to come crashing down, and it's
Yep.
going to look even worse than what everyone feels it is right now. I think we got to what I think are going to be in 26 the two biggest issues, which is healthcare and AI.
Yes.
Because and how that all ties in with the economy. I don't want to take up too much of your time. How can people find you?
Sure. So obviously, if you like my rantings, you'll hear it every day, Monday through Friday, for about an hour on iTunes Conservative Review podcast. I also have video versions of certain clips on Rumble at Sierra Podcast, Horowitz Show on YouTube, and then a really exciting new Substack that I'm starting at Daniel Horowitz, Liberating Truths on Substack. Let us be liberated in truth this year, Melissa. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you for coming on, my friend. So, folks, you got to go follow Daniel. You know, in this world that we are living in of a truly fundamentally broken media landscape, where grifters are everywhere making money to lie to you. Maybe the most important part about Daniel is that he is one of the good guys and he is not doing that. So make sure you're following him. You can follow me at Melissa Blosick NH or at Rebuild NH. You can feel free to email me anytime, director@rebuildnh.com. Until next time.